Hey y'all, welcome back. It's Frank Burrow, your host of Addiction Warfare. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the first episode, Brian's Battle. I got a lot of good feedback from that. So appreciative of you guys. You know, it did exactly what I wanted it to do. It got people talking. I got family members reaching out to me about their loved ones. I had a few friends reach out, letting me know that they appreciated me being honest and transparent and sincere. Even my own siblings appreciated me just speaking my truth because they know it was a difficult time for me, and to share that wasn't easy. So, we're going to jump right into episode 2. It's called Addiction Warfare or Exposing Addiction. Essentially, it's just letting people know the truth about addiction. You know, what is this thing that we call addiction, and what do we do about it? You know, where do we go for help? So, like always, I want to stress the importance of the severity of this disease, of this illness. Addiction is a deadly disorder, and most of the time, you need medical attention to get the proper help you need. So, this is nothing to play with. If you're struggling right now, please reach out for some help. There's help available. If you don't know where to go, there is a hotline that has an awesome connection and resources available. It's 1-800-662-HELP. They're going to get you the information you need. The key is to be honest and transparent about your situation. That's the best way to get help with this disease. It starts with honesty, and you got to think about it. Why is this disease so devastating? Because it's a disease that lives in secrecy. It's a disease that's built on denial. So therefore, what it takes to be honest and aware of what you're dealing with to even motivate change is the trickiest part. So, you know, what is addiction? I know you've heard that word, and I know you've probably said to yourself, man, you know, I'm really addicted to my coffee in the morning, or, you know, a TV show. It's addicting, right? And so we throw around that word so loosely these days, but you know, it's an attachment. It's a dependence, and usually to something that's unhealthy or dangerous for us. There's so much criteria out there. There's definitions, and there's books and research. There's a lot of information out there about addiction, and it's funny. We've been studying this thing for probably 100 years, and we still know little. We still don't know exactly what we're dealing with here or how to cure it and all that. You know, there is no cure. There's only treatment. So let's first talk about, like, what do we know? Well, it's cunning, it's baffling, it's powerful, it's insidious. It doesn't discriminate. It has no mercy. It can get anybody, anytime. You don't have to develop as a kid. It could come on at 35 years old or 50. It could be alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling. It can be prescription pills, something you get from the doctor, you can get hooked on. So, you know, what's the difference between somebody who uses and somebody who's addicted? Well, that's the trick. That's the trick. Most of the time, an addict doesn't really know till the end, or doesn't admit it until the end, until there's no other alibis or avenues to escape. So it's like the fight is to keep the lie alive. Like, that's the whole battle. Imagine walking around with a life-threatening illness that you can't let nobody know about, because if they only knew, then what are they going to think about me? When in reality, it's like somebody needs to know so I can get some help. So just imagine dealing with that. I've experienced, I've seen it, and there's age old debates and conversations that say, is it a choice? These people really helpless? I don't know. Talk to my father. My father has 7 kids, and apparently all he wanted to do was to be with his children, but the drug had a hold of him. So therefore, it's a lose-lose. Not only is he not getting the satisfaction he wants out of the drug, he's not being able to do what he wants to do either. Imagine how that must feel. However, to deal with those feelings, the only thing that makes it better is the drug. That's just an example of the mental warfare that goes on with an addict. So we know it's genetic, it's environmental, right? There's so many contributing factors. It could be trauma, it could be abuse, it could be grief. I knew someone who was a normal drinker until they lost their husband. And that void or that loss, that grief was just too much for them, that they drank to cope, and basically unraveled within a year. And this person a year ago that was a pillar in their community, right, now can't stop drinking long enough to even go to work. So it's very hard to understand. It's very hard to diagnose and detect. And I'm going to tell you, one of the biggest reasons why is the denial. The denial around addiction is the biggest battle. It's coming to terms or realizing that you have this disease or this disorder, being willing to admit it, and then being willing to go get help for it. Okay, there's so much that has to happen. That's why back in the day, a lot of times people were hitting rock bottom. So it was like they had nothing left, no other option but to get help. And what they did was locking them up in insane asylums and sending them to the hospital, the psych wards, whatever, and then discharging them. There really wasn't adequate treatment back then either. But in a sense, it's when you have no other options, you're willing to do anything, then it can work, right? But what about the people who still have stuff? I knew alcohol. He was a millionaire. I knew the color of his skin was almost like orange. Like clearly anybody else in the room could see that he was dying, or something was severely wrong. Why? Because his skin was orange and he couldn't see it. He had money, property, prestige, and it was almost like he couldn't see the truth because, in a sense, he didn't hit rock bottom. How can I be an alcoholic? I'm a millionaire. And so, like, we're dealing with a disease that's tricky in this day and age, which is even more difficult to diagnose, detect. Okay. But the treatment's available. There's so many options. And, I'm not asking you to diagnose yourself. I believe in going to the proper professionals to get the help you need. A substance abuse licensed professional is your best bet to go. Why? Because they're going to be the most skilled. Even though at the emergency room, they're there to treat everything. Okay, they might just detox you and discharge you with some information to go get help. That's not their specialty, but they will try to link you to it, right? You probably have family members that has concerns about you, or you might be a family member that have a concern about your loved one, right? But is that enough? Probably not. Why? Because it's the individual that needs to make that decision or come to the reality of what they're dealing with. That's why this is so hard. It's not like cancer. It's not like you can plug me up to some machines and say, yep, he's an alcoholic or he's a drug addict. You know, see right there, there's the addiction right there on that x-ray. You know, they have these the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria. Like it's a spectrum from mild to severe. And they'll give you symptoms and signs and things that are related to substance use dependence and see where you fall on that spectrum. Now, that's super helpful, but it's still a spectrum. And guess what? It still relies on me. I remember I used to have this bright idea. I'm going to go get some help. So I'm going to go see this therapist and I'm going to pay her $100 and I'm going to lie to her. I mean, that's what I was doing. I was going in there and I was telling her exactly what she wanted to hear. And she was telling me how good I was doing based on what I was telling her. So, you know, I didn't mention that I was drinking around the clock. You know, I was just like telling her, you know, I'm having trouble sleeping, you know, and I got some relationship issues, things with work. But, you know, I would minimize, rationalize. And so she only could give me feedback based on what I was telling her. So imagine going to see a substance abuse professional and they ask you a series of questions and you lie to them and they say, well, you know, you don't really, you don't meet the criteria for inpatient treatment. I'm sorry. Why? Because you're not detoxing or you're not in withdrawal. You know, you're not out of control. So again, I can't stress it enough, this honesty piece. And I get it. You got denial, you got self-deception, you got the minimization, you got all these things, these contributing factors. Well, I still have a job and blah, blah, blah. The truth is, you could be suffering right now. I know for me, I was suffering in silence, and the main objective was to never let anyone know. And that got me nowhere. As a matter of fact, you know, I thought that if no one knew, then it didn't happen, right? It never happened. So to my surprise, guess what? Guess who knew? Guess who knows? Me. You know about your secrets. You know about what you're dealing with. And I feel for you because I know what it was like for me. It was turmoil. No wonder I could never be at peace. I was living a lie. I needed help and I didn't know how to ask for help. I needed to see a professional. I needed someone to diagnose me. So that's really what we're talking about today. What is addiction? We all know if you're just completely out of control, okay, you can say, all right, I need help. But what about these signs and symptoms? What are some signs and symptoms of substance use disorder or addiction? There's so many different names. It keeps changing every 5 years or so. But and think about the stigma of being an addict or an alcoholic, right? That's why they decided to do the research and say that this is a disease. What is a disease? It's not something that you decided. It's not something you chose to have. You know, when I was 14 years old, I wasn't like, man, I'm gonna be an addict when I grow up. No, I just started smoking just like everyone else. Started smoking a little bit of pot, you know, drinking a little bit. You know, I didn't know. And that's why this episode is called Exposing Addiction, to tell you the lies I didn't know. It's not all harmless as it seems. There's some predispositions to it. If I really looked at my family history and I was educated enough about prevention, I might have took a different route. I don't know. It might have been helpful because it's all in my family. It's all up and down the bloodline. So for me to think that I could just smoke pot and drink like normal people, I was already mistaken, right? So that's something for you to think about. That's something for you to explore. Do you need help? Well, think about your situation. Are your relationships suffering? Are you continuing to drink and use drugs despite negative consequences? Does this thing preoccupy your mind and your time? Buying, using, coming down, finding ways to get more. Does that occupy a lot of your time? What about when you're just obsessing about it? It's an obsessive and compulsive disorder. I I used to think because I used to wait till after work to drink that I was normal. But yeah, I'm watching the clock the whole day, just waiting. So even though when I wasn't using, I was obsessing about it. Man. And just think about it. Have you had situations with your work or your social group conflicts due to your use? I mean, I just named off about five of the criterias that's in the DSM-5 for substance use disorder. And they say like the mild to severe, like 3 out of 5 or whatever. I mean, this stuff is all available. The American Psychiatric Association is awesome. Like I said, there's some information on the web, but you don't want to go too far into that because you might get misinformed. So, bottom line, the best route to go is see a substance abuse professional. Call that SAMHSA hotline. But if you really think about it, though, I met all that before I even turned 18 years old. I was already having the consequences and I continued. Did you drink more and use more than you intended to? How many times have that happened? That's like me back in the day. I used to say, yeah, I'm just going to have a couple beers, man. And I end up drinking 17. And the funniest thing was the next day, the day after, when I told myself I'm going to have two again, like legitimately thinking, well, this time will be different. Like, man, come on now. And then they had the gentleman's curve. I love that. It really talks about the progression. This thing is chronic, progressive, and fatal. It's fatal. The end game is not good. So if you look that up, it's called the Jellinek curve. JELLINEK curve. It really just shows the progression. It's like a progression chart, right? Starts off as casual use. Back in the day, you remember you used to drink like the Boone's Farm and just steal your parents' liquor, right? No big deal. Or I don't know what generation you're from, but we used to drink the Boone's Farm. Or I remember drinking PJ. Like, even thinking back, did anybody question why we're drinking out of a bathtub with a bunch of fruit in it, like, or a big trash barrel full of like liquid and fruit? But anyway, smoke a little bit of the pot, like no big deal, right? So because it didn't control my life yet. So was I at it? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think I was then. So maybe I crossed some line. But it was innocent enough because it was like recreational use, experimental, then recreation. Then it was like I like this so much that I feel like I need more of it. So I start to go down that road. Says here, feelings of guilt, unable to discuss the problem. Now we're starting to get into a little more severity. But at first, it's not that big a deal. Why? I have a life. I have friends. I have other things that are important. So my life's not completely surrounded around. Ask any alcoholic addict, in the end, the drug or the booze or the sex or the gambling, it was the centerpiece of their life. So no wonder they held on to that for dear life. Try approaching a rabid dog in an alleyway. The dog's in survival mode, fight or flight, and maybe you're just trying to help it, but it's probably going to be like, rawr, rawr, you know. It's try approaching an addict to help them. They get angry, defensive, or they run because they think that if you take the drug away, that they'll have nothing left. So think about that progression chart. We start to have blackouts. We start to the promises, you know, the broken promises, man. Imagine the kid who's in the baseball game and, you know, just looks out in the stand. He just wants to see his old man. The old man said, you know, son, I'll be there this time. This time I'm going to be there. I promise. And right before the ninth inning, he looks out there one more time. Dad's nowhere to be found. Now, where's Dad? Is he out partying, having the best time ever? I doubt it. I doubt it. I know what it's like to be in the addict's brain. I remember the guilt. Maybe he thought, I'm just going to have a couple beers. No big deal. I'll be fine. 2 led to 4, 4 led to 6. And then the guilt and shame set in. Oh, man, I can't go now. I can't show my face to my son's game. So imagine that. No wonder this thing is such a terrible thing to deal with because no one wins. The family suffers. The addict suffers. The drug don't even do what it used to do. That's another symptom, increased tolerance. Now we start heading down that curve. We start to see that what I used to drink and what I used to use don't work for me the same. Ask any opiate addict. Tolerance works the same when we change the way we digest the drug. I know a kid, all he did was got a sports injury, right? This guy had no substance abuse history whatsoever. Goes to the doctor, has the surgery, they give him some Vicodin. He takes the Vicodin as prescribed. He likes the way it makes him feel. And he gets hooked. He gets physically hooked. Not even necessarily mentally hooked, even though he told me it did make him feel like he had a lot of energy, a lot of strength. So when he was telling me this, he was like, man, I never felt anything like that. It's like I had to have more. So it was just another example of how crazy this thing is and how hard it is to prevent. Like this guy never would have seen this coming. So he was hooked, and guess what he did? The pills, he needed more of the pills to get the same effect. That's called increased tolerance. So he started to crush them up. Why? Because when he snorted it, it hit him harder. And he was able to start to get that same effect that he desired. Guess what? That wore off. Guess what? He couldn't afford the prescriptions. The doctors finally cut him off because you're not supposed to stay on prescriptions forever. You don't need it anymore. The injury is healed. But the addiction has just begun. This same guy went on to buy pills off the street. And then he started to realize he can't afford the pills. So what did he do next? He started to buy heroin and snort it because he said, I'll never, ever do a needle. I'll never. He also said months or years back that he would never snort a pill. And guess what? He starts to cross his own boundaries. Another telltale sign that you're heading down that road to full-blown addiction. And guess what? He started shooting up. And thank God that he finally reached the bottom and got some help and was able to live to tell the story. But that's just one example. You know, we always think like, oh, it's just harmless. Right? The doctors, they're just doing their job. They're not the necessarily to blame. the guy, he didn't know, and that's why I'm exposing this truth. A lot of people don't know. I will go out of my way not to take prescription pain pills. Not because I don't think they work. It's because of my predisposition to addiction. I don't want to get hooked to pills, so I will try not to use them. Plus, I have an understanding of what they do. They don't necessarily block the pain, or I would say relieve the pain. They block the pain from my brain, so it feels like it's not there, but it's there. So I can get real philosophical on you. You know, I'll try not to, but pain is necessary. Pain is necessary. If I twist my ankle playing basketball, well, the pain tells me, Brian, you shouldn't go back out there tomorrow. Let your ankle heal. Imagine if I popped a Percocet, I probably wouldn't feel the pain. I'd probably go play basketball on my already injured ankle. And guess what happens when the painkiller wears off? I'm going to be hurting even worse. So that's just one example. And that's what I do. I can get real technical and I can bring up the research for you, but all that's available out there. And like I said, if you see a professional or go to a treatment center to be assessed, you know, you're going to get the proper diagnosis. I'm just letting you know in basic terms and using examples to help you understand. Because a lot of times, like, I didn't get what people were telling me. They would try to explain this to me, but I needed it broken down. And that's why I'm here for you. Here we go. The loss of control, the unreasonable resentments. Now I'm not eating right. I'm not sleeping right, but I'm still using. And we go on to these fears, irrational fears, drinking with others who drink like me. So now my group of friends is changing socially. If you ever suffer with addiction, you'll notice that, like, people start to look at you like, man, you're not, Brian, you need to slow down, buddy, right? And it goes two ways. One is, man, I don't want to hang out with Brian no more because he's a lunatic, right? And then the other way is, I don't want to hang out with these people because they keep breaking me, you know, they keep hounding me about my use. So I isolate, I separate myself, or I find another group that's like me. Why? Less shame, more comfort. At the end of the day, ask any addict, you know, that's the motivating drive, to feel that ease or to feel the relief, right? From what? You know, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Did the pain come first, or did the use create the pain? We can get deep on that topic as well. You know, is it some type of void that leaves me predisposed? And we'll get into that stuff later with the trauma, the grief, the family dynamic. But just to touch on it a little bit, I believe that essentially we're still trying to feel this craving of feeling okay, feeling at peace. That's usually why we use in the first place. But then we start to create problems for ourselves, relationship issues, work issues, maybe even the physical dependence or withdrawal. Even like, you know, the next day you're hungover, and instead of drying out drinking water, you drink more beer because it makes you feel better, right? So I just think about that stuff and think that, man, what's the goal? The goal is to feel that peace that we as humans crave. If you really think about who we are as humans, what we do, you know, we have those two basic drives: seek pleasure, avoid pain. That's what we do. We want to feel good. We want to feel at peace, and we want to run away from danger. We want to relieve pain. It's necessary. And so, what do you think drugs and alcohol do, or sex or gambling? I can go on down the chart. What do you think they do? They relieve pain and they bring pleasure. So we're dealing with something that's, when it's done right, it's useful. Alcohol, drugs are useful. They have a purpose. And that's why it's hard to cast them out of the world. They're not going anywhere. So we're asking people who have addictions and have problems to try to get clean and sober in environments that are likely not totally alcohol and drug free, because the world don't change, but we change. And like I said, once I start to realize where I'm headed, or I reach that bottom, or that significant event happens, like the DUI or the divorce, or the loss of a job, something that wakes me up out of my fog and makes me really see life as it is. And that's what happened to me. I was able to then have the honesty that was necessary to get the help. So I could look at charts all day and diagnoses and the criteria, and I can run through it and say, yep, that's me, that's me. Oh, that's not me. And I could do that all day long, but until in my heart, or at least with clarity, that I can say, yes, I have this problem, then I'm not likely to get the help that I need, right? And that's the main objective. So if you're someone who's struggling with this stuff right now, or if you have a family member, then, really have some grace and some tolerance for yourself or for your loved one, and say, man, I'm suffering in silence, or my loved one is suffering. They're not bad people. I knew a mother of three. She was the best mother in the world. And if you would have told me that she would not have custody of her children today, like I would have never believed you, because I seen a person who was awesome, just a beautiful person, turn into an addict who could not stop no matter what, and lost everything. And if you would have told me that in her mind that she did this by choice, or that she's happier without her kids, like, no. As a matter of fact, she told me that it's the lonely existence, but she can't quite come to the realization of what she's dealing with enough to get the help. And so she continues on in the abyss, and that's the sad truth about addiction. And I've seen it happen. My own father would get clean, relapse, get clean, relapse. And I don't think he ever really fully admitted or understood his problem enough to get the help that he needed for longevity. And so that's what we're battling with here. We're battling with a disease, and people will argue about the whole disease concept. Listen, the research is in. They've been researching it for a long time. It's a legitimate disability, legitimate disease. It meets the definition of a disease. And so what do you do with the disease? You treat it. It's almost like diabetes. Diabetes is not curable. Addiction is not curable. However, diabetes is treatable. There's people walking around right now, you would never know that they had diabetes. Why? Probably because they're taking their insulin daily basis. It's something that they have to tend to. And with the addict, the alcoholic, you you might never know that they had this problem. You're not going to spot me in the grocery store and be like, "Yep, that guy's an addict." Why? Because I'm treating my disease. So, I bounce around a lot during this episode, because this is what we're dealing with. It's very hard to understand, and it's even harder to explain. But there's books available. There's a lot of research out there. There's Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. They do a beautiful job. They have, self-help programs. They have treatment centers everywhere now that can get you the education that you need. Also, most addicts and alcoholics in the later stage, or most people who are chemically dependent, you need medical attention. So I urge you to please reach out for some help so you can start to fight this thing, because I know that you're battling. I know the mental warfare you're experiencing, and I know that you might not be quite sure whether you're an addict or not, and I get that. And so one of my suggestions to folks is always the honesty, right? Well, what that really means is I got to look for the similarities, not the differences. For example, if I get a list of symptoms for a disease, I'll give you a perfect example, COVID, right? So I look at the list of COVID. One time I got a little cold this last month. I got like a little cold, right? And I had a few of the symptoms, but I didn't have them all. And so here, my brain's like, I'm looking for ways that I don't have it because I didn't want to have it. So I'm like, well, I don't know if this I don't there's diarrhea on there or is sore throat. So I'm looking for ways to say like, nope, I don't have it. Why? Because I don't want to have this damn COVID. So I did the same thing with addiction and alcoholism. Like I didn't want to be an addict. I didn't want to have a problem. I didn't want to get help. Therefore, I wasn't looking for ways that maybe I might have this diagnosis, right? Because I didn't want to change. So when I did finally get help, it just it dawned on me. My whole perception changed to the point to where now I educate people on look for the similarities. I needed to say, you know what? I got 3 out of the 6 symptoms for COVID. I should go get checked, right? That would be the most sane, rational thing to do, because let's make sure that I don't have it instead of trying to minimize and rationalize. So when it comes to addiction, alcoholism, if I even feel like there might be a problem, I should go get checked. I should go see a professional, because you're better safe than sorry. And nowadays, another epiphany that I had, well, it was such a relief when I was able to find a diagnosis for my problem. And that's why we expose this truth. Like somebody told me that it was a miracle that they were an addict, that they were grateful to be an addict. And I was like blown away. And I get that so much now. Why? Because I understand my disease now, and I know that it's treatable. So it was like a relief, because everything I ever dealt with in my life, almost all was related to this disease. And I was able to find one diagnosis, and it gave me hope. Brian, you're not addict, you're alcohol, but you're not a bad guy. And therefore, and they're like, if you're an addict, well, guess what? There's help for you. There's no help for I don't know what my problem is. Like there's no solution there. Oh, it's this, it's that, it's this. Well, guess what? It was able to pull it under one umbrella for me, and what a relief. Now I treat this disease on a daily basis, and I hope you guys can find that as well. So if you're struggling, again, I'm gonna tell you till my face is blue. If you're struggling, if you even have a hint of like any of these, what they would call symptoms, like relationship issues, if you're drinking more than you intend to, if you are using drugs or drinking despite negative consequences, if you feel withdrawal, like if you don't have your substance and you start to feel withdrawal symptoms, if you are increasing your use to try to get the same desired effect, if you're preoccupied, if it's like in your mind a lot, these are all symptoms that you can find in the DSM-5 and the criteria for substance use disorder. So therefore, this is something that maybe you should explore. Reach out, call that hotline. If you're local, there's a ton of places I can steer you to. So the biggest thing you could do right now is get honest with yourself and pick up the phone. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Glad you could join me. Episode 3 will be on its way, but I hope you enjoyed the show. Take care. God bless.